Okay, happy Purim, everybody. We are on 86b, towards the bottom of the Mishnah. Zaken Mamre. So this is one of the people who are Nechanaki who get chanek as a punishment. A Zaken Mamre is a rebellious elder, right? And the Mishnah and the Gemara will proceed to define what that means. Zaken Mamre LP Beis Shanamar, what's the source? There's a whole paragraph in the Torah when something is hidden from you in a court case in judgment, and etc. So we're going to analyze that whole passage. There were three courts in Yerushalayim. Echad Yoshev al Pesach Harbayis, one at the entrance to the temple, the Mikdash. V'echad Yoshev al Pesach Hazara, one in the courtyard of the entrance to the courtyard of the Mikdash. V'echad Yoshev B'lishkas Hagasis, and one in the office of the stone, right, of the cut stone. So that's these are all places where the Sanhedrin sat. Bain Lazeshal Pesach Harbayis, the Omer. So the if you have a case of a Zaken Mamre, this is how it occurs. They come to the court at the entrance to the temple, to the Mikdash. And Kach Darashi v'Kach Darshu Chaverai. And the Zaken Mamre says, this is my conclusion. This is like how I expounded whatever the case was. And we'll see what cases qualify later on. And this is what my colleagues ruled, or this was their reasoning. Im Shamu and Kach right? Right? And this is what I've taught, and this is what my colleagues taught. Im Shamu, if the those sitting in court, in those judges in this court have a received tradition that they had heard from their teachers, Amar Lahem, so they tell them, Vim Lav, and if not, Bain Lahen Laosin Shal Pesach Hazar, they go off to the next level court. And then he says the same thing. He says, "This is what I taught, and this is what my colleagues taught. This is what I learned, and this is what my colleagues learned." Im shamu, and if they have an answer, if they have a tradition, which is right, Amar lahem, and he says they say so. Vim lav, and if not, elu ve'elu boyin levesin agadol shablishas agadis. Then they go to the third court. This is like the final court, the Supreme Court, if you will. Shemimenu yotzi Torah l'chol Yisrael. This is their responsibility is to promulgate the Torah to all of the people. Shenemar min hamakom hu asher yivchar Hashem. The continuation of that paragraph mentions from that place which God chooses. And Chazer Le'iro. So then, anyway, so ultimately they rule against him. So if he goes back to his hometown, Shana v'limed b'derech shahei lamed. If he continued to teach the defeated opinion, Potter, that's not considered a Zaken Mamre because he's not, he's okay. We'll see why in a minute. Vimhora lasos, but if he told people, if it was a theoretical matter, he kept, interpreting whatever the issue was the way he interpreted it, contrary to the court's interpretation. That's not the problem. That's not chiyuv misa. But if he instructs people to act in a way that follows his opinion and not the opinion that was decided by the Sanhedrin, by the ultimate court, chayav, then he becomes a Zaken Mamre. Shenemar, v'ha'ish asher yasev zadon, someone who does purposely, levilti shmal hashofet, etc., not to listen to the judges, eno chayav asher yoreh lasos. So it says isha asher yaseh, someone who acts, right? So the Zaken Mamre is only one who instructs people to act in accordance with his opinion. It's not just theoretical. Talmid shahara lasos, pater. One who is a talmid, who's a student, he's not like a member of the court. That's also not a Zaken Mamre. Nimsa Chumro Kulo. So it turns out that, being strict with him, like you're not at the level yet that you can be called a member of the court. You're still, an acolyte. Uh, so we're being strict with him, but actually we're being lenient with him because even if he acts in the same way and instructs people to act in accordance with his opinion and not the court's opinion, he's not a Zaken Mamre because he's not yet a Zaken, he's still a Talmud. Okay. Gemara says, Tana Rabbanan, the rabbis teach. People ate of our Mishpat.
At
Uh,
what time do we consider him a zaken? He has to be a certain age, or it's based on his wisdom. I mean, we hear about in the Haggadah, which we're going to read now in 4 weeks. Rabbi, who was it? Rabbi Gamliel, or he was Keilu Shivim. He became the Nasi at age 18 or 20. Who did I'm not sure I said the right Chacham,
yeah,
but
yeah, seven, Hariani Kaven Shivim Shana.
exactly.
Right. So it sounds like, I mean, I don't know for sure, but it sounds like there's at some point he is promoted in the sense that he becomes, there's some kind of official membership. Like you remember that we discussed how the court was physically set up. You had the members of the court were sitting in a semicircle, and then there were the rows of talmidim, right, who became actually were the alternates. If someone had to
Right.
resign from the court or recuse himself or whatever, then they picked somebody to promote. So there was some kind of promotion from, the rank and file from the rows of Talmidim to the actual members of the court. Exactly how that took place is not entirely, I don't know if we've covered that or not. But there was some kind of, designation that you're no longer a student, you're now a Zaken.
But
Okay, but it's
typically,
not it's not just age. You don't just age into it, or there's no test or anything, I guess. It's just, they ranked all their students by who was the most worthy of being a member of the court, and when his turn came, when they needed to seat somebody on the court, they would pick, that person and the next in line, if you will, and he would move from the students' benches to the court. So, whether there was some
but
formula,
zaken,
I don't know exactly, but that's, there was clearly some kind of procedure in which you're no longer a student, you're now a member.
zaken is an elder. I mean,
Yeah, right. But
so
it doesn't necessarily, the context is it doesn't mean an old person, right? You have a lot of old people who are not who are not qualified to be teachers or members of the court, right? It's
correct.
the designation, the zakanim were, I mean, it also means old, but that's not what it means in this context. It means I don't know, sagacious, something like that.
And there are people who are bar mitzvah, or even maybe not even bar mitzvah, nah,
We're
who
very worthy. Yeah,
who who know
they're
who know
exceptional
all of
people.
Shas. I mean, they've learned all of Shas.
Right. I mean, they were exceptional people. They say about Rav Chaim Ozer Grodzinski that I think at the age of 18 he was a member of the Vilna court, and the Vilna court was that was a one of the most highly regarded in the world. And he was such a Talmud Chacham, such a genius that he was at the age of 18, if I'm not mistaken, he was promoted to that court. Okay, Tana Rabbanan. Ipalei mimcha davar lemishpat. B'mufla shebebeis in a custom davar. We're talking about someone who is distinguished, a distinguished member of the court. Mimcha. Davar mimcha from you, zeyoetz. That means someone who gives advice. Um, as we'll see, it means advice when it comes to making leap years or leap months. Someone who's a calendar expert. V'chein hu omer mimech yatsa choshev al Hashem ra yoetz bliyal. From you comes out one who plots evil against Hashem, one who gives wicked advice. Um, then davar, zu halacha. Davar, a thing. This is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Lamishpat zehadin. Din refers to Gzera Shava. And ben dam ladam, between this blood and that blood, ben dam nida, dam leda, dam ziva, having to do with the blood of a nida, of a woman who gives birth, or a zava. Um, Bein din ledin, and these are all we're listing all the things that qualify as ruling about them qualifies as zaken mamre. Bein din ledin, between one judgment and another. Bein din nefashos, dine mamonos, dine makos. Either din refers to either capital cases or monetary cases or corporal punishment cases. Bein nega lenega. What does nega refer to? Bein nige adam, nige batim, nige begadim. The tsaras of a person or of a house or of clothing. Divrei rivos visharecha. It continues. Divrei means elo acharim arachim l'hakdeshos. These are nadarim, vows. Rivos means hashkoa sota varifa segla v'taras mitzara. Disputes are things that have to do with the sota, who's having a dispute with her husband, or breaking the neck of the calf, which is atoning for a murder, and making a mitzara pure again. Bisharecha, in your gates. This refers to things having to do with the agricultural tithes, not tithes, but things set asides for the poor. So then, any of these things, v'kamta, you get up. Mi besim, kamta v'elisa elamakom. You get up and go to the place that God selects. So, kamta means you leave your own base and your local base in v'elisa, and you go up. What does it mean to going up? You're going up to the place which God chooses. As an aside, it's like this shows you that Eretz Yisrael is that the Mikdash is the highest point of Eretz Yisrael. This is in some metaphysical sense, clearly. Eretz Yisrael Gavami Kol. And by the way, Eretz Yisrael is higher than all the other places. So in other words, if you're going up to the temple, to the Mikdash, you're going up to the highest point there is. El Hamakom, to the place that God chooses. Malami Sham Makom Gorim, that it has to be in that place. The only place where this rule of Zakin Mamre is in effect is in the temple. Now, Bishlama based on Mikdash Kavod Eretz Yisrael. All right, so Gemara says, first of all, that aside, I accept that the Mikdash is higher than is the highest point in Eretz Yisrael. Dichsiv v'alisa. It says right here, right? You go up, right? You go up from any other place in your country to the Mikdash, so that implies that the Mikdash is the highest place. But Ella Eretz Yisrael Kavod Mikol Ratzos Minali. Where do you get this idea that Eretz Yisrael is the highest land? Dichsiv Lachen Hinei Yamim Baim Num Hashem. Pasuk says where this in Yeshayahu, in Yirmiyahu, the prophecy is days are coming. People will not say, "I swear by God who took the people of Israel from Egypt." Kiim, what they are going to say is, Israel. They will say, "I swear by God, who brought Israel from the north and from all the countries where they were dispersed, and they will live in their own land." So that implies Asher Hela. If you're leaving any place in the diaspora and coming to Eretz Yisrael, Hela, you're going up. So that means Eretz Yisrael is the highest. Okay, that was just an aside from our
But
topic.
we do say, I mean, the Beit HaMikdash and the Sanhedrin was in Yerushalayim, right?
Yes,
So we do say, when I was in Israel, that Olim the Yerushalayim, that Yerushalayim is a
we
bit
do say
higher
that.
than
Yeah,
other places in Israel itself.
yeah, that's right. That's right. It's that terminology probably stems from this idea in the Gemara and ultimately in the Tanakh. Tanuraban. Okay, so we just had a whole list of things that the Zaken Mamre applies to, right? All those things like, the blood, Dam Nida and Irani and Eglar Roof, all those things we just mentioned. Now the Gemara is going to analyze that a little bit. Tanuraban. Rabbi said, Zaken Mamre Lochayev El Al Dovershes Zonakaris V'Shigdos Chatos. Here's another source which says that Zaken Mamre only applies to something for which the punishment, if you do it on purpose, is kares, and if you do it accidentally, you bring a chatos offering. Divrei Rav Meir. That's what Rav Meir says. Rabbi Yehuda Omer al davar sheikaro midivrei Torah uperusha midivrei sofrim. Rabbi Yehuda says no, that it's nothing to do with that. It has to do with something that is that the principle is in the Torah, and the details are worked out interpreted by the rabbis. Rabbi Shimon Omer, afilu dikduk echad dikdukei sofer. Rabbi Shimon says, no, even any minor points. If you are going to rule against the Sanhedrin, that is enough to make you a zaken mamzer. Okay, now my Talmud Rav Meir. What's Rav Meir's reason? Rav Meir is the one that says it has to be a kares offense for that is being dealt with for you to be a zaken mam, right? Gamar davar. It's like there, Shava. Ksivacha ki mimcha davar la mishpat. When a thing, a davar, is being just is beyond you in judgment or is unclear. V'nelam davar me'en hakol. Elsewhere, talking about a chatos for when the court rules incorrectly, it uses also the word davar. So that latter case is only talking about a karis offense, and that we know. The Gemara elsewhere derives that afkan davar shechayv al zedona karis shigul chata. So therefore, we're going to say the same applies to zaken mamre. For Rabbi Yehuda, what's Rabbi Yehuda's?
What was that again? What was
It's
the?
Xer Shava. So we have you have the word davar that appears in the about the zaken mamre, and you have the word davar that appears in the par helim davar shel
Dibur.
not shel sibur, but the Sanhedrin, right? When the court makes a mistake, and that the Gemara derives elsewhere only applies to an Isser Kares that they made a mistake about. So we're going to apply the word davar that anywhere this other place Zakin Mamre where we have the word davar, we're also going to say it's only when it applies to an Isser Kares.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Now Rabbi Yehuda said, and it's something that the principle is in the Torah and the details are worked out by the rabbis. What's his source? Al piha Torah sheyarucha. According to the Torah, the law that they will teach you. Adi Torah v'yarucha. There has to be a Torah. There has to be a law, and the sheyarucha. There has to be guidance from about the specifics from the court. That's what that's written in the chapter of Zaken Mamre. So. That's where he gets his idea. Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Shimon says any little detail can is subject to zaken mamre. Asher yagidu lecha min hamakom hahu. Um, it also says there anything that they tell you from that place. I feel called to who anything they tell you, right? There's no reason to restrict it according to Rabbi Shimon.
That
Okay.
seems it seems interesting. Rabbi Shimon gives this opinion because we've seen in many places that he's the one who deviates from everybody. For example, when he talks about the
He's
level
taking a big risk
the
then, huh?
levels of um, of killing by Beit Din, whether the
Mm-hmm.
chenek, and
Yeah, yeah.
he says that skila, that Rabbanim say skila is the worst, and he says that sreifa is the worst. I mean, that's one example. So he
Yeah.
deviates from everybody else, and that's not the only example. So it's kind of interesting that he's the one that says you deviate in one iota, it would be considered a zaken mamre.
That's a good point.
I mean, would we consider him a Mazake Mamre then? Chas v'chalila.
Very good. Okay. Amalei Rabbi Huna Rabbi China l'Rav. Rabbi Huna said to Rava, "Tirgumi li lahamas nisa livid ramer." You know that the whole brisa that we listed, all those things that you are that qualify for zaken mam, right? How would you explain that according to Rabbi Meir? Because all those things, on the face of it, they don't have any Easter karis involved. Amalei Papa. Puk Targamalei, Rava says to Papa, you take care of it. Go tell him how to explain this. Okay, so we're going to go through all those things, and we're going to find a way in which they could involve an Easter card. Ki Palei, the Torah says, when something is hidden from you, b'muflash of Beis Din Kosev Medaber. We're talking about a member of the recognized member of the court. Mimcha Zayoetz. The word mimcha means somebody who gives counsel, and we said aber shanim. This is talking about someone who is involved in intercalation of months or years. Kiditznan, as the Mishnah says, hein heidu shema abrim es hashana kol adar. They testified, talking about the Mishnah and Eidos that records a bunch of testimonies in court. Shema Rizashana Kol Adar, that you can the whole month of Adar you can still make an extra Adar. So, even today or even next week, you could say, you know what, this Adar, it's not we're going to make a second Adar after this one, rather than having Nisan coming up. Shayu Omrim Adar Purim.
Oh, today,
Because
Purim.
yeah, so they would. That's right. How about that? Because people used to say, um, only until Purim can you decide that there's going to be an extra month, and so the Brisa says. That no, it's the whole month of Adar. Even right up to the end of Adar, you can say, "Oh, we're going to have a second Adar." So why? The point is, how does this? And this is the question we're dealing with now. Is like, how does this become an Easter Kares, right? What's the Easter Kares? According to Rabbi Meir, it has to be an Easter Kares. So what does intercalating months have to do with it? Because if you're adding a new Adar, you're changing the date of Pesach, right? So if there was really supposed to be a second Adar and you didn't do it, then your Pesach is not on Pesach. Like either way, you're adjusting the date of Pesach, and Pesach, of course, eating chametz on Pesach is an Easter Kares. Um, Continuing, davar halacha. The next thing the brisa was the word davar zu hilchos achadasar. Um, the This is has to do with the rules of the 11th day. So, a quick review of the rules of dam nida and dam ziva. So, um, according to biblical law, according to Doraisa, a woman who becomes a nida um, is Anita for 7 days. Okay. And then the following 11 days, what happens if she sees blood during those days? So if it's one day, then she's a Ziva Katana. If it's 3 days, she's a Ziva Gedola. Um, and so the question is, so if it's during the 11 days following the 7 days of her, after her period begins, so um, so that's considered a continuation of Nida, and it's not Ziva, right? After the 11 days, then you go with the regular Zav rules, right? That if it's one day or 2 days in a row, it's Ziva Katana, and there's certain purification rules. And if it's 3 days in a row, it's Ziva Gadola, and it becomes a um, and there's different rules. So the Idmar. So now, what is the dam? What is the case of the dam that we're saying qualifies for zaken mamre? The Idmar Asiri. If it's the 10th day of the ziva cycle, Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asiri Kichi. The 10th day is like the ninth day. In other words, if you start bleeding on the 10th day, then it's the same rules as the ninth day. You have to see if it's 1, 2, or 3 days. Or Shimon Lakish are Asiri Kachadasar. No, the 10th day is like the 11th day. So if you started bleeding on the 11th day, then you would have to have to you would not assume that it's Nida blood, but you would treat it as if it's potentially Ziva blood. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Asiri Kishi. Rabbi Yochanan says the 10th day is like the ninth day, Machi by Shimur. Just as if you start bleeding on the ninth day, you need to check on the 10th day, right, to see if you have consecutive days. Afasiri by Shimur. Same thing on the 10th day. That if the bleeding starts on the 10th day of this 11-day period, you treat it the same thing. It's like you have to treat it as occurring during that period. Rish Lakish Amar Asiri Kachanasar. Rish Lakish says no. The 10th day is like the 11th day, where everybody agrees. My Chadasar Laboy Shimer. Just as the 11th day, you don't need to treat that as you don't you don't have to treat that day as you don't have to check the next day. Um, Afasiri Lebaishim, same on the 10th day. So that's the basically the what and so this potentially is an Easter Kares, right? Because if a man who sleeps with a woman who's a Nida, That's kare. So determining exactly the details of what is nida and what is ziva, that turns out to be a kares issue, and that's how Rabbi Meir would say yes, things having to do with this blood could be an Isser kares.
He doesn't have to check according to Reish Lakish. It would be a problem or not be? Okay.
No, it doesn't. I mean, it's the point here is that the issue has to do with an Easter card. So whichever way you come out, you're going to rule that something is the 10th day, the ninth day, the 11th day, whatever it is. It has to do with an Easter kares because you're dealing with is the person a zav or a nida. If she's a nida, then it's an Easter kares. So dealing with this matter is relevant to an Easter kares. That's the point here. Without getting into
Uh-huh. Okay.
wait
Right.
till Maseches Nida and we'll get into the nitty gritty of this.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Mishpat Zadin. Mishpat, the Brisa says, refers to Xera Shava. Din Bito Mayanu Sasa. What kind of Xera Shava? We had this recently. That a man who sleeps with his daughter, who is the product of that he raped someone and had a daughter, and then he sleeps with the daughter. That then we have Xera Shava. That is an Easter Kares. Tiamar Rava Amar Levi Yitzchak Bar Avdimi Asya Hena Hena. Asya Zima Zima. We had a double Xereshava, which we dealt with
Right.
recently, right? You may recall.
Yes.
That's how we determined that a man who sleeps with his daughter, who was born through rape, gets kares as well. Okay. Ben Dam Ladam, the Brisa said uh, that wait a second, what did we just have before? The the Nida um, was davar, right? Halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Now we're dealing with the blood of nida, leda, and ziva. Dam nida. What's the dam nida? Beplukta de kavia ben mahalal rabbanan. The dam nida could be referring to the the dispute between Akavia and the rabbis. Titnan, Dam Hayarok. What about blood that has like a Yarok in modern Hebrew means green, but apparently here it's like yellowish. Akavia ben Mahalal Matame v'cham Mitarin. So there's a dispute between is this Dam Nida or not. So again, if it has to do with Dam Nida and you're ruling against the majority, you're dealing with an Easter Karis. Dam Leda, what about the blood of childbirth? Paplukta de Rav Levi. This is the Malchus of Rav and Levi. Dietmar, Rav Amar Mayan Echadu. Rav says, like, why is there a difference between childbirth, postnatal blood and nida blood and menstrual blood? So Rav says the source of the blood is the same place, right? Hatar timato, vatar tiarato, right? In some cases, in the case of a regular, cycle, the Torah says this makes you tame. In the case of blood during the period of tahara following childbirth, the Torah says this is the same. It's the blood's coming from the same place, but this doesn't make you tame. It's just the way it is. Of Levi Amar Shnei Mayanos. Levi says no. There's physically he thinks there are two different sources of this blood, and that's why they have different rules. The regular menstrual blood has one source in the body, and that makes you tame. And blood after childbirth has a different source in the body, and that blood does not make you tame. That's why there's a difference. Nifta matame, nifta chatar, and you can't have both at the same time, right? If the tame blood, your menstrual blood is the source is sealed by the opening of the childbirth blood, and vice versa. Nifta matar, nifta chatame. Um, so anyway, the point is that again, this dispute has to do with an Isser Kares because of if you sleep with a woman who's a Nida, so you have to know if she's a Nida or not. Dam Ziva, what about the blood of a Zav? Beplukta de Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yeshua. This machalkas between Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. Ditznam, if a Mishnah, Kishta, Shlosha Yomim B'toch Achad Yom. If you bleed in labor, within the 11 days of becoming a zava. Im shafsam me'es le'es v'yalda, if the blood abated for 24 hours, for es le'es, for a full day, and then she gave birth, harezu yoledos bezov. So that's considered a woman who was a zava, and then she gave birth, right? They were separate. In other words, the first instance of bleeding was not related to childbirth; it was a ziva. and then there was 24 hours elapsed with no bleeding, and then she started bleeding for childbirth. So she's both a Yoledes and a Zava, right? And then the result is at the end of the childbirth period, you have to bring do the purification rituals for both childbirth and Zav. Um,
But she's not. She's only. She's a
in other words, she
Zavakatana
first
for
became a
one
Zav.
day.
She first became a Zava. She never had a chance to recover from that.
Oh,
And then she became a Yoledes. Then she gave birth. So at the end of the childbirth period, she's still both in the she has to take care of the tuma of childbirth and also the tuma of Ziva,
oh,
right? No, she
she's
never
still
had a
confused.
chance to fix the Ziva, the Zava part.
Oh, she's still
Um,
a Zava. She's
Right. Diva Rabbi
not.
Lazar, Rabbi Yeshua, Omer, but Rabbi Yeshua says, Laila v'yom kaleli Shabbos v'yom. No, not 24 hours, but a night and a day, like we count the days of the week. Sheshafta min atzar v'lo min adam. And by the way, um, what does it mean that she, had that there was an abatement period? Means from the pain of childbirth, but not necessarily. So she could be having bleeding the whole time. What we're talking about is how do you know if the original bleeding was from childbirth, because if the pain stopped, then it wasn't from childbirth. It must have been from Ziva, and then the childbirth started afterwards. Okay, so that's how that has to do with, becoming purified afterwards. Also, is an issue of Isur Kares. Ben Din Ladin. What about um, the Brisa said, Ben Dine Mamanos Dine Fashos Dine Makos, that it referred to you could have Zakin Mamre dealing with capital cases, monetary cases, or corporal punishment cases. So how do you get an Isur Kares for these? Dine Mamanos, how can there be an Isur Kares with monetary cases? Shmuel said, Shnaim Shadanu Dinaim Din. If two judges judged something, really it should be three. But if they did it improperly with only two, it's still valid. Allah Shinikoin based in Chasuf. It's called a insolent court. Um, but it's still valid. Rabbi Yavo Amar L'divrei Akol Ein Din Ne'em Din. That no, a two-person based in has no effect. How does this? What does it have to do with kares? Um, um, yeah. So if this court extracts money from one party and gives to the other, now I think Rashi will explains this, but basically, how can that be an Easter kares if you use that money for, let's say, for kiddushin, right? To marry a woman. So if it was not your money, then the kiddushin is not valid. If it was your money, the kiddushin is valid. What happens if she goes and sleeps with someone else? So big difference if she was married or not in the first place. And that's an Easter kares. Dina Nefashos, what is a capital case which has to do with kares? Beplukta the Rabbi Rabbanan. Titania, we have a brisa, Rabbi Omer v'nosata nefesh tachas nefesh. Mammon, when it says you pay a life for a life, that means not actual execution, but monetary penalty. Atomer Mammon, now you say it's monetary, no, nefesh mamash, maybe it means literally you have to execute the murderer. Nemer nesina lamala, v'nemer nesina lamata. um, Vinasata, right? You should give this punishment. Malahal Mammon Afkan Mammon. Usually, giving refers to money. So when it says Vinasata Nefesh Tachas Nefesh, that you give one life for the other, it means money. Um, so
How
again,
many in this case before, where they decide that let's say they use the money for kiddushin,
mhm.
the court um we're trying understanding whether it's three judges or two judges. There was an opinion in the beginning of the Masechta that according to one that two would be sufficient. It doesn't matter here, but if the court says it's a valid ruling, then where's the Zakeh and Mamre here? There had to be at least two, maybe three judges, and
Right.
it's not
So if
only
you're
one. So we
so
saying two of them are Zakeh and Mamre?
No, not that the Zaken Mamre was on that court, that the dispute arises. There was a court of two people that extracted money from one party and gave it to the other. Um, and so then somehow there was some uncertainty about this. The court ruled one way and the Zaken Mamre ruled the other way, whether that was valid or not. Okay, if he rules against the court, then the money is is then he's advocating that the money was extracted, the money is with the wrong party, right? The one that the Zaken Mamre says this one owns the money now. That's incorrect because he's going against the Sanhedrin. The Sanhedrin says the money belongs to party A. The Zaken Mamre says the money belongs to party B, right? So if that money is used for kiddushin, that's how you could get, that would validate or invalidate the kiddushin,
Ah,
and that's how you could get an Easter kares out of it if there's a case of Eishes Ish.
okay,
Follow?
okay, okay,
Okay.
okay.
Next one is Dine Makos. What about corporal punishment? How is that an Easter kares? B'flukta Rabbi Shmuel Brabanan. It's not. We have a Mishnah. Makos b'shlosha. Divrei Makos Bishlosha, that a court of three can administer corporal punishment. Mishum Rishmol Amr Be'asrim Bishlosha. Rishmol says 23. Has to be 23. So how does this have to do with an Easter Kares? Um, if they if it was if the court improperly uh, gave someone corporal punishment and it turns out they were wrong, then they have to compensate him for his suffering. And again, so this is um, the money is in the wrong hands if you're doing it wrong. And if it's used for, again, if it's used for kiddushin, then you could have an Easter kari. So a little bit far fetched, but it's still, it's following the whole, like the way that this whole thing is playing out.
But this is 3 versus 23.
Right. So again, so if the let's say the Sanhedrin rules, the actual rule is it has to be 23, and the Zaken Memory says no, this court of three which administered lashes, it's fine, right? So so the lashes, he's saying the lashes, if the lashes were administered improperly, then the court has to compensate the victim, and that money, is used. So if the money is appropriated improperly, then you have the same risk of that we
Oh,
had before, the risk of using that money for kiddushin.
mhm.
Bein nega l'nega. What about bein nige adam nige batim nige begadim? What about like how does tsaras of people, houses, or clothes have to do with kares? Nige adam. Let's first analyze tsaras of a person. B'chukta rishuv rabbanan. Titnan. We have Mishnah in Baharas Kadam Laser Halavan. If the so you have like these colors and so on have is important in diagnosing saras. In Baharas Kadam Laser Halavan, if the pale spot came before the white hair grew in tame, then you're tame. With saras, you say Halavan Kadam Baharas, but if the white hair grew in first and then the pale skin tahar, then it's not saras. Safek tame. If we're not sure which happened first, then tame. Safek tame. If it's we're unsure, we say you're tame. Rabbi Yeshua Omer keha. Rabbi Yeshua says it's faint. What does that mean? My keha. What does he mean? It's faint. It's pale. Amarava kaha tahor. It's as if it were keha. It's as if it were just like pale, and he's tahor. So again, if you're incorrectly uh, diagnosed as not having tsaras, and then you go into the mikdash, chayv kares, right? Because really you are tame. So that's how a dispute about whether a person is mitzvah or not has to do with an Easter kares. That's pretty straightforward. Nigay batim. What about tsaras of a house? Beflukta Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shimon Rabbanan. So the dispute of Rabbi Lazar and the rabbis. Now we have a Mishnah. Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shimon Omer Liolam Ein Habayis Tame Ad Sheyirah Kishnei Grisin Al Shnei Avanim B'Shteik Salim B'Keren Zavis. You have to have for a house to qualify to have tsaras, you have to have this whatever this spot of tsaras has to be at least the size of two grease. That's I think like a lentil
A
or
lentil,
some
yes,
kind
a
of, yeah, a
lentil.
small lentil, and it has to be over two bricks in the house on two different walls in a corner. Okay, so pretty restricted. And arko kishnei grisin v'rachba grisin. It has to be at least two lentils wide, long, and one wide. Okay, so my Talmud Rav Elazar Rabbi Shimon, what's the reasoning? because ksiv kiru, ksiv kiros, because it says in the chapter about saras habayis, it says uses the word on the wall, kir, and also kiros on the walls, singular and plural. Ezu kirshu kikiros. How can you? What is it? One wall or two walls? Havi omer is the Karen's obvious. We're talking about a corner where two walls meet, and the saras has to spread has to. Be present on both of those walls in that corner to fulfill this condition. Whereas the rabbis um, uh, don't subscribe to this. So again, the dispute, so there could be a dispute about whether the house is tahor or tameh, and then a person who goes into that house is either tahor or tameh, and if he incorrectly thinks he's tahor and goes to the mikdash, it is a isur kares. Nigay beganim. What about clothing? Tzaras of clothing. Beplukta Rabbi Yonasan of Tulmus Rabbanan. The Tanya Rabbi Yonasan of Tulmus. Rabbi Yonasan says, Minayin lepricha begadim shitara. How do you know that a a tsaras that spreads over the whole beged, the whole piece of clothing is tahor? Nemra karachas v'gabachas biyadam, because the words karachas and gabachas are used regarding a person who becomes a mitzara. And nemra karachas v'gabachas babegadim. The same words are used about clothing. Malahalan, just as a person parach bekulo tahor, the Torah says explicitly, if you have tsaras on all of your whole entire body, then you're tahor. Paradoxically, the same applies. Afkan parach bekulo tahor. Same applies to the clothing. But if it doesn't apply, if you hold it doesn't apply to clothing, you could have a dispute over whether this baged, this clothing is tahor, and if a person comes into contact with it, and then is he tahor or tameh? And if he goes into the mikdash, that's that is, that becomes an isur kares. So we're still in the middle, but this goes on for some for most of the Amud. So I think we'll stop here and let David pick it up tomorrow.
Now, David, or is it Ellie?
Sorry, Ellie. Yeah, it's Friday, isn't it? Ellie, right.
Now you said you were translating interesting kehe, or keha as something light or faint. That seems to now I was looking and now it's Sfaria. They translate it as dark, but Rashi seems to say it's light because he says
Yeah,
kilu
that I was going with
kehe
Rashi.
anega dehavi misimane teora kishe mishtane halovein la'achar
Hmm.
hesker.
Okay, interesting. I didn't know that. I mean, I was following Rashi. That means faint, but I didn't know that there was a different way to interpret it.
I don't know. That's what is it? Well, how does I wonder how the Sonsimo translates that in the Chumash, whether it's Kehe means dark or
Hmm.
light.
All right, look it up.
Yeah.
Good question. Okay, happy Purim.
Happy Purim.